Hi, Sid Dobrin with Inventive Fishing here, and I've been thinking a lot about red snapper and all of the confusion about fisheries management over the last few years pertaining to red snapper. Anyone who's fished red snapper, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico, knows that these last few years of management of the red snapper fishery has been just insane. But just this past week, we've gotten some great news about red snapper management. You see, the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council, one of the 8 councils that represents the National Marine Fisheries Service with NOAA, voted to delegate management authority over recreational red snapper harvest to each of the 5 Gulf states in federal waters. This has been a long time coming and a very needed change. You see, in the past few years, NOAA research has shown that red snapper populations have improved in the Gulf of Mexico. Yet NOAA and NMFS continued to reduce the amount of time recreational anglers could catch red snapper in federal waters, highlighted by a ridiculously short and historically low season of just 3 days with a 2-fish limit in 2017 before the Department of Commerce intervened and brokered an exchange of an extended state water season. Recreational anglers had already complained when NMFS imposed a 9-day season in 2013, and that season only included 1 weekend, preventing many recreational anglers who can only get out during the weekends from participating in the limited harvest, and a 10-day season in 2015. A decade prior, the season had lasted 6 months with a 4-fish bag limit. Now, driven by the frustration of access and a lack of consistency, the directors of the Fish and Wildlife agencies of the 5 Gulf states, again, Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas, issued on March 13, 2015, a joint statement announcing that they had, quote, developed a framework for cooperative state-based management of Gulf red snapper. The 5 states proposed to work together to develop a new independent management body called the Gulf State Red Snapper Management Authority, GSMIRMA, which would be comprised of the principal fisheries managers from each of the Gulf states, not NFMS Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council. Of course, within a few days of the 5-state proposal, representatives of the commercial fishing industry began to respond by resisting the very idea of state-based management. Of course, we anticipated commercial fishing's rebuff of the idea. After all, in 2006, the GMFMC, the Gulf Coast Fishery Management Council, developed the Red Snapper Catch Share program, which allocated 51% of the total red snapper harvest to the commercial industry. According to the Coastal Conservation Association, fewer than 400 commercial operators now own 51% of the entire red snapper fishery, and there are plans to allocate about another 20% of the catch to charter and for-hire businesses, leaving only 29% share to recreational independent anglers. So, on March 20th, 2015, the presidents of the American Sport Fishing Association, the Billfish Foundation, the International Game Fish Association, the Congressional Sportsman Foundation, the Coastal Conservation Association, Guy Harvey Ocean Foundation, the Center for Coastal Conservation, and the National Marine Manufacturers Association all signed a letter to the governors of the 5 Gulf states supporting the state-based Gulf red snapper management model, citing the strength of the sport fishing community as an economic contributor to each of the state and as a significant contributor to the conservation efforts in each state. I do have to point out, too, that a significant part of the problem with the Council's management of fisheries policies, strictly from the perspective of the recreational angler, has been the composition of each council. NOAA appoints council members. They're not elected, and there's no representation distribution requirement. Historically, commercial interests dominate, if not monopolize, the council's makeup. Only recently have recreational interests begun to find seats on the councils, and still only in very limited numbers. So last year, NOAA Fisheries issued exempted fishing permits allowing each of the 5 Gulf states to set their own season for red snapper in state and federal waters during 2018 and 2019. Because of the success of the 2018 seasons, which provided 40 days of fishing in Florida, the council began working toward a long-term solution for state management of private anglers. This year we'll see similar regulations in place. But now the states have the authority, and each state will get a share of the allocated recreational quota, and states will set bag limits and size limits as long as the minimum is somewhere between 14 and 18 inches. All that's left for the plan is to be approved by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, and that should happen before the 2020 recreational red snapper season. So that's great news for red snapper anglers and for recreational anglers in general, as more localized management is certainly going to benefit the fisheries and the industry. And if you want to learn more about red snapper fishery management issues and what it means for you as a recreational angler, be sure to get a copy of my new book, Fishing Gone: Saving the Ocean Through Sport Fishing. You can get a copy through Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com or any other online book retailer. It's also available as an ebook. Fish on.
Can't.